You know what, Wayne? You're probably right. I'll grant you that. Dane, you would probably feel a little different about this if you had a relative or loved one die from a drug that was laced with something lethal, like the drugs Maduro was sending over to our country. That guy's a threat to all countries, and I'm glad Trump had the balls to go over and arrest his sorry ass. First of all, you assume that I haven't had any friends or loved ones or family members or any of that die of drug overdoses of any kind or that have been laced with fentanyl or whatever. You make that assumption, which you really don't have any reason to believe that. But I go ahead and concede to you that yeah, I mean that makes sense that someone who's had a loved one or whatever would tend to feel differently about it than what I'm asking. You know, okay, so what? I mean, as men, as civilized human beings, as leaders in the community, the patriarchy, making decisions for our families and our communities, our states, our country, our civilization. As men, do we maintain, protect, defend, operate, manage civilization, society based on how we feel about things? Or do we make decisions based on what is best for our community and our civilization and such, and based on what is legal and allowable and acceptable? For instance, if you and I have a certain agreement to interact with one another in a certain way, and then for some reason I have an emotional urge or an emotional impulse to behave differently than what you and I have agreed we were going to behave towards one another like. If I suddenly had an emotional experience of some kind that I believe justified me breaking my word to you, is it then acceptable for me to break my word to you? Just because I feel like it. Just because I'm emotional. I've had a family member die, or I've lost a job, or my wife left me, or my kids do something crazy, embarrassing, whatever, disappointing. If you and I agree that we're going to interact with one another based on certain standards and ideals and principles, is it acceptable to you that if I can justify breaking those agreements simply because I feel a certain way? I mean, is that okay? Because if it is okay for me to just behave however in the damn hell shit I think I should behave based on my feelings and not my duties and not my agreements and commitments, if it's okay for me to behave the way I want to behave based on how I feel, well, then I don't understand how you and I could have any sort of dealings whatsoever, because I wouldn't be able to depend on you. I wouldn't be able to depend, you wouldn't be able to depend on me either. You would not be able to depend on me keeping my word and behaving in the way that I agreed to behave and in the way that you expect me to behave. You wouldn't have any a reason to believe that I was going to keep my word if you knew that I could just wake up one morning or over a period of time, I could have certain feelings because of what you said here, because I've had a family member or a loved one, a relative or whatever, die, or I don't know, get sent to prison or get hurt in an accident, whatever it is that caused the emotional response for me. Then when I experienced that emotional response, then I was just gonna, I could just act on that emotion and behave however I thought that emotion merited, and that it would be a moral, ethical thing to do. Then you and I wouldn't be able to have any actual dealings between one another because we wouldn't be able to trust one another. because our behavior would be strictly based on our feelings and not our duties. In the patriarchy, masculinity focuses on duties. I have duties, you have duties. Everyone has duties. And those duties are supposed to be honored and respected and fulfilled regardless of how we feel emotionally. That's how men beat back the wild beast and chop down the forest and develop civilization and develop society by doing our duties regardless of our feelings. This is why you won't find a building on this planet that was built by a purely female crew. Why? Because women are a lot more susceptible to their feelings and not their duties, you see. And so, as a patriarch, I try to make my decisions based on my duties. And I have a duty to keep my word. I have a duty to do what I promised to do. I have a duty to go by whatever rules I've agreed to go by. And how I feel about it doesn't really matter, does it? So we have a constitution in this country. And then beyond that constitution, we have over 2 centuries, 2.5 centuries, something like that, of case law that's been hammered out in the judicial system, right? Supreme Court, state courts, that sort of stuff. There's been different challenges. Originally the vice president was just the second place winner of the election. He wasn't a running mate picked by the president. Used to, senators in Washington were appointed by state legislatures. They weren't elected by the popular vote like they are today. Personally, I think we should go back to that, but that's another video for another day. But over 2.5 centuries, we've hammered out through case law and different challenges and things like that, how our country is going to operate and what powers the president and our government in general, the courts and legislature as well, what powers they have. So what I'm asking in my original post right here is not whether or not there is emotional justification for doing whatever. You see, that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking, what's okay to do if somebody feels like it. What I'm asking here is how it is that we can legally justify the President of the United States enforcing a United States law, a law passed by the U.S. legislature, an indictment, an arrest warrant handed down by the judicial system or the executive branch, the police, the FBI, whatever. Where the U.S. gets the legal authority to take their policies established by their political leaders who were elected or appointed by American citizens, how they can take those policies and enforce those policies on a sovereign. The word sovereign means that they reign themselves. It's an independently ruled sovereign, independently ruled country like Venezuela. Like the Venezuelans didn't elect our political leaders. The Venezuelans, they don't pay taxes here. They don't get a vote here. They didn't, call their political leaders to get them to establish an American law. So that's what I'm trying to figure out in my question right here. It's nothing to do with whether or not I've had loved ones die from drug overdoses or taking drugs that were laced with lethal chemicals or how I feel. And it's nothing to do with how you feel. The question is, where does Donald Trump get the legal authority? And I'm looking for black letters on white paper. Okay, I'm looking for the expressed law. The Constitution calls it enumerated powers. Where is it where the executive branch of the U.S. has the power to go to a sovereign, that's the key word, right? Sovereign nation and enforce their laws from U.S. laws on that sovereign nation? Well, we arrested him. How are you going to arrest somebody who is the head of state of another country? If they're sovereign, they're not subject to the American legal system. I mean, they're not. I mean, you can go over to Southeast Asia. There are countries in Southeast Asia. I believe Thailand is one of them, where people go on these, these sexual vacations. And they go over there and they do things that are explicitly illegal in the United States. Now, if an American goes to Thailand and commits what would be a sexual crime in the U.S., when they come back to the U.S., they could be arrested because that's in the law, that Americans traveling overseas to do things that are illegal, that when they come back to the U.S., they can be arrested and punished for those crimes, those U.S. crimes that they committed overseas. See? So it can work like that. However, people in Thailand who aren't American citizens, why can't the U.S. just go over there and start arresting those human traffickers or arresting those clients of the human traffickers who aren't U.S. citizens? Why can't the U.S. go over to Southeast Asia and enforce their laws, the American laws, on the people in Thailand? Why can't they do that? Because Thailand's a sovereign country. And the American political leaders are not the political leaders of the Thai. So, I mean, if Thailand's head of state, and I have no idea who that is, but if Thailand's head of state refuses to crack down on the human trafficking industry in Thailand, why can't Donald Trump send in the Delta Force or the Navy SEALs or the Green Berets or whoever he wants to send in to just arrest that head of state because he won't abide by American laws? Why couldn't he do that? That's what I'm trying to figure out, man. That's the question I'm asking, is where it is that President Trump, what I'm asking right here, where it is that Donald Trump gets the legal authority to impose American judicial decisions and American legislative policies on the leadership and the citizens of a sovereign nation. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking about how I would feel or how you feel or how other people feel. I'm asking about what is logically and objectively defensible based on the United States Constitution. Where does he get that power from? That's what I'm asking, and I'm Dane.